If you've been paying attention to the housing market lately, you've probably felt this: confusion. One headline says prices are dropping, another says inventory is tight, another says rates are at the highest they've been in years. Then the next week, you hear demand is surging again. And if you live here in Southcoast Massachusetts, you might be wondering what is actually happening. Because sometimes when you hear nationally, doesn't match what you're seeing locally. And that's because most headlines focus on surface level numbers. They talk about interest rates, month-to-month changes. They talk about short-term fluctuations. But home prices don't move randomly. They respond to the structural forces underneath the surface. If you understand those forces, the market stops feeling emotional and starts making sense. So today, I want to walk you through 3 factors that actually drive prices here in Southcoast Massachusetts. Once you see them clearly, the confusion fades. Force number 1, supply constraints. Let's start with supply. Southcoast Massachusetts is geographically constrained. We have coastline, we have wetlands, we have conservation land, we have zoning restrictions, we have historic districts. That matters more than most people realize. In some parts of the country, if demand increases, builders can add thousands of new homes quickly. Here, not so easily. Land is limited, permitting takes time, infrastructure can't expand overnight. And in towns like Westport, Mattapoisett, Fairhaven, and Dartmouth, especially near the water, buildable land is finite. That creates structural scarcity. Scarcity doesn't guarantee prices always rise, but it does tend to stabilize values. Because when supply can't expand rapidly, prices often hold firmer during slower cycles. So when someone asks me, are prices going to crash? The first question I ask back is supply exploding? If the answer is no, dramatic collapses become far less likely. Force number 2, lifestyle-driven demand. Now let's talk about demand, but not just economic demand, lifestyle demand. People move to Southcoast Massachusetts for specific reasons: coastal access, community feel, less density than major metro areas, access to Providence, commuter routes towards Boston, remote work flexibility, quality of life. That kind of demand behaves differently than speculative demand. Speculative demand is when people buy because prices are rising. Lifestyle demand is when people buy because they actually want to live here. And markets driven by lifestyle tend to have more stability because people aren't just making financial decisions, they're making life decisions. We saw this clearly when remote work expanded. Suddenly, buyers realized they didn't need to be as close to major cities. Towns across the South Coast became more attractive. Now yes, demand fluctuates. Interest rates matter. Economic confidence matters, but lifestyle-driven demand doesn't disappear overnight. It softens, it adjusts, it shifts, but it doesn't vanish. And that matters when you're thinking long-term about pricing. Force number 3, capital and interest rates. Now let's talk about the force that gets the most attention: interest rates. Rates impact affordability. When rates rise, monthly payments increase, some buyers pause, demand cools. When rates fall, payments improve, more buyers re-enter the market, demand increases. But here's the key: rates influence speed, they influence behavior, they influence transaction volume, but they don't override supply constraints and lifestyle demand long term. If rates drop significantly in a supply constrained market, what usually happens? More buyers compete for limited inventory. Competition increases, prices often rise. If rates rise sharply, demand cools. Inventory may build slightly, price growth slows. But unless supply dramatically outpaces demand, structural collapse is less common. So instead of asking, what are the rates doing? A better question is, how are the rates interacting with supply and demand right now? Rates are one piece of a larger system. Now that we've broken down the forces, here's what really matters. Whether you're buying or selling in Southcoast Massachusetts, stop reacting to headlines. Start evaluating structure. Ask yourself, is inventory expanding rapidly or is it still limited? Is lifestyle demand weakening or still strong? Are rate changes temporary shifts in activity or long-term structural changes? When you look at the market this way, volatility feels less dramatic. Short-term swings feel less emotional. You start to see patterns instead of noise, and that changes how you make decisions. If you're buying, focus on location quality, focus on long-term desirability, focus on your time horizon. If you're selling, understand your micro-market supply. Understand your specific buyer pool. Understand where leverage exists right now. Southcoast Massachusetts isn't immune to economic shifts, but it is shaped by geography, lifestyle demands, and capital flows in ways that are more stable than national headlines suggest. When you understand the forces underneath the surface, the market stops feeling unpredictable and starts feeling understandable.